The night he left me in the rain didn't begin with thunder. It began with silence. The kind of silence that feels heavier than any storm. The air was still, the sky was dark, and the world around me seemed to be holding its breath, waiting as if it already knew something I didn't. I remember standing near the old wooden gate, the one he always slammed shut when he was angry, and hearing nothing but the faint hum of traffic from far away. Inside the house, everything looked normal. Too normal, like a room staged for a photo, hiding the chaos that had been simmering for months. He walked out without looking at me at first. That was strange. He usually had something to say, a complaint, a blame, a sigh. But that night, he didn't even bother. He just grabbed his keys from the table, the same table where I had once imagined we would sit as a family someday, and muttered something under his breath. I couldn't even catch the words. Maybe they weren't meant for me. Maybe they were meant for himself. Or maybe he simply didn't care enough to make them clear. When he opened the door, the wind blew in, carrying the scent of rain that hadn't yet begun. I felt the temperature drop, and I wrapped my arms around myself, instinctively bracing for something. Though I didn't know what. Something in my chest tightened. Something felt final. I asked him softly, "Are you coming back tonight?" I don't know why I asked. Maybe I wanted reassurance. Maybe I wanted the lie. Maybe I wanted him to pretend, just one more time, that he cared. But he didn't even turn around. He just said, "I don't know," and walked out. That, "I don't know," echoed through every empty corner of the house, bouncing off memories I didn't want to revisit. I followed him outside, the cold air hitting my face more sharply than his words. The sky was shifting now, darkening, thick clouds gathering above us as if the universe itself was preparing for something dramatic. The wind picked up, brushing against my hair, warning me. I should have gone back inside. I should have closed the door, locked it, and chosen myself. But I didn't. I walked after him, barefoot on the damp concrete, the chill biting my skin. My voice was barely a whisper when I said his name. He stopped. But he didn't turn. He didn't offer comfort, didn't ask why I followed, didn't notice the tremble in my voice. He only stood there, shoulders tense, keys dangling from his hand. That's when it hit me. He wasn't leaving for a drive. He was leaving me. My heart dropped into my stomach, yet I tried to hold myself together. I tried to steady my breathing. I tried to convince myself I was imagining things. Maybe he needed space. Maybe he needed time. Maybe this wasn't as bad as it felt. But the truth was right there, standing in front of me, wearing the same indifference he had worn for months. Before I could speak, before I could ask anything else, the sky opened, violently. Rain poured down so suddenly it felt like someone had turned on a giant faucet above us. Within seconds, we were soaked. My hair clung to my cheeks, water running down my arms, dripping from my fingers. The cold cut straight through my clothes, but the pain wasn't from the weather. It was from watching him walk toward his car with no urgency, no hesitation, as though the storm didn't bother him at all. He finally turned to me when he reached the driver's side door. For a split second, I thought, I hoped, he would reconsider. That he would see me standing there, drenched, fragile, breaking, and something inside him would shift. Something human, something kind. But all he said was, "You'll be fine." Not "we will be fine," not "I'll be back," not "I didn't mean to hurt you." Just "you'll be fine." A sentence that sounded more like dismissal than comfort. He opened the car door and sat inside. I stepped forward, my feet splashing in a small puddle forming beneath me. I wasn't trying to stop him. I didn't want to chase someone who didn't want to stay. I just wanted closure. Something real. Something honest. But instead, all I got was the sound of his engine starting and the headlights flickering on. The bright white beams lit up the rain, making it fall like sheets of shattered glass around us. He didn't look at me again. Not once. He simply put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. As he pulled away, the tires splashed water across the road, and the sound of the engine grew softer and softer, until it disappeared completely into the night. I stood frozen. The rain hammered against my skin, soaking me so deeply that I could no longer tell what was rain and what was tears. My breathing grew uneven, my chest tightening as though the storm around me had moved inside my ribs. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't collapse. I just stood there, numb, staring at the empty road where he had vanished. Something inside me cracked open, but it wasn't the kind of break that destroys you. It was the kind of break that exposes everything you've been ignoring. Truths you've painted over, red flags you've decorated with excuses, warning signs you've silenced with hope. Standing there in the rain, I realized how small I had made myself for someone who couldn't even turn around one last time. How much I had sacrificed. How much of myself I had given away piece by piece, thinking that if I just loved him harder, he would change. But love doesn't work like that. Love isn't a currency you pay with suffering. Love isn't something you earn by shrinking yourself. And suddenly the storm didn't feel cruel anymore. It felt honest, cleansing, necessary. The thunder began to rumble above, echoing the turmoil inside me. But instead of fear, I felt a strange clarity. A sharp, painful, beautiful clarity. The kind that comes only when something finally breaks open. The kind that forces you to see what you've been avoiding. I wrapped my arms around myself, not out of weakness, but because for the first time in a long time, I realized I would need to hold myself now. No one else was going to do it for me, not him. Not anyone who saw my vulnerability as an inconvenience. The rain grew colder, heavier, hitting my skin like reminders. Reminders of every time I ignored the signs. Every time I chose him over myself. Every time I believed his promises instead of my own worth. I looked up at the sky. It was dark, endless, roaring. And yet, for some reason, I didn't feel afraid. There was something strangely empowering about being alone in the storm. Something liberating. Something awakening. Then, slowly, very slowly, the realization sank in. His leaving wasn't the tragedy. His leaving was the answer to every doubt I had pushed aside, every question I had feared to ask, every uneasy feeling I had buried beneath hope. And as painful as it was, as raw as it felt, I finally understood. Being left in the rain was not the moment I was abandoned. It was the moment I was freed. The moment his car disappeared down the road, the silence around me felt unreal. Not the peaceful kind of silence. No. This was the kind that rings in your ears. The kind that fills every inch of your chest with a heaviness you can't quite name. I stood there for a long moment, letting the rain hit my skin, letting the cold soak through my clothes, letting the truth settle into my bones. It was strange, really. I had always imagined heartbreak as something explosive, screaming, crying, falling to my knees. But what I felt wasn't loud at all. It wasn't dramatic. It was a quiet collapse, a soft unraveling, like a thread being pulled from the center of a fabric until everything loosens, piece by piece. I finally took a step back toward the house. My feet felt heavier than my heart, which was saying something. Each step echoed on the soaked concrete, each one a reminder that I was walking into a home that no longer felt like home. A place that had become a museum of things that were never real. When I reached the door, my hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the shift happening inside me. Something had changed. Something irreversible. I didn't know if it was loss or freedom, pain or rebirth. Maybe it was all of them at once. I pushed the door open, and the warm air from inside brushed against my skin. It should have comforted me. It didn't. The house felt unfamiliar, as though the moment he left, the walls exhaled and everything settled into its true shape. The furniture looked different. The lights looked too bright. The air felt too still. But the worst part was the silence. It wrapped around me like a blanket I didn't ask for. Too heavy to remove. Too unbearable to wear. I closed the door behind me and leaned against it, letting my body slide down slowly until I was sitting on the floor. Water dripped from my hair onto my knees, forming a small puddle on the wooden tiles. My breath came in shallow waves. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just stared at the opposite wall, at the picture frame holding a smiling version of us that no longer existed. I tried to search that image for answers, for signs, for the moment when things shifted. Was it the day he stopped asking how my day went? Was it the night he walked past me without a word? Was it the moment he realized I loved him more deeply than he ever planned to love me back? Or maybe the truth was simpler. Maybe he had left a long time ago. Tonight was just the first time he did it physically. I rested my head against the wooden door, the cool surface grounding me. I inhaled deeply, and that's when a strange thought entered my mind. Maybe everything that feels like it's falling apart is actually falling into place. The thought wasn't comforting, not yet, but it lingered. It sat in the corner of my mind, waiting for its moment. I stood up slowly, my clothes clinging to me. My socks squished with every step, but I didn't bother taking them off. I walked to the small mirror hanging in the hallway. The reflection staring back at me didn't look like me. Not the me I thought I was. Anyway, my hair was drenched, mascara smudge, eyes red but dry. But behind all that, something new flickered. A quiet fire, a spark, not anger, not revenge, recognition. The recognition of a woman who had been holding herself together for too long. The recognition of someone who had given love to someone who didn't know what to do with it. The recognition of someone who had stayed, even when staying hurt more than leaving ever could. I lifted my hand and touched the mirror, as if trying to connect with the version of me I was seeing. The version that had survived a moment she thought would destroy her. I whispered into the empty hallway, barely audible, "You're going to be okay." My voice cracked on the last word, but the truth was still there. I was going to be okay. Not because he left, but because I was finally done pretending I needed him to stay. I walked into the living room, the sound of rain still roaring outside. I sat on the sofa, curling my legs beneath me, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. The room felt bigger without his presence. In a strange way, it felt lighter. I could finally breathe without waiting for his reaction, his mood, his silence. The raindrops tapped against the windows, steady and rhythmic. My heartbeat slowly matched that rhythm, calming the chaos inside me. I closed my eyes for a moment, listening, really listening. And that's when I felt it relief. Not the loud, excited kind. The quiet kind. The kind you don't even realize you need it until it arrives. The kind that settles over your chest like a gentle hand saying, "You're safe now." Safe from his words. Safe from his indifference. Safe from the emotional drought he called love. The storm outside grew louder, but inside me something softened. Something released. Something opened. It wasn't healing, not yet. But it was the beginning of it. And beginnings, I realized, often look like endings from the outside. I hugged the blanket tighter around me and let out a slow breath. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to chase after someone. I didn't feel the need to explain myself. I didn't feel the need to fight for a place in someone's heart who had already emptied it. The night he left me in the rain didn't break me. It revealed me. And everything from this moment forward would change because of that. The rain hadn't stopped. If anything, it grew heavier, pounding against the windows with the same intensity as the thoughts swirling in my mind. I sat there on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing and everything at the same time. The world outside felt chaotic, wild, fierce yet strangely protective. As if the storm was standing guard, cleansing everything I had carried for far too long. But storms don't last forever. And sometimes they bring more than destruction. They bring clarity and unexpected arrivals. After what felt like an hour of sitting in silence, my breathing finally calmed. My pulse steadied. But my thoughts, they wandered. To the years I spent with him, to the moments I questioned myself, to all the times I lowered my voice so his could be louder. I didn't know the full truth until that night, but deep down, I had always felt the distance forming between us. Still I stayed. Because that's what we're taught, isn't it? To be patient. To be understanding. To be loyal. Even when the person we're loyal to stops showing up. I don't know how long I sat there before something cut through the noise. Something small, almost too soft to hear over the storm, but somehow unmistakable. A car engine. Slow, steady. Approaching. My heart jolted. For a split second, I wondered if he had come back. If guilt had finally hit him, if he had realized what he'd done. But this engine sounded different, deeper, heavier, smoother, not his old, sputtering sedan. I stood up slowly, the blanket slipping from my shoulders. I walked toward the window, each step heavy with uncertainty. The rain blurred everything, turning the world outside into a watercolor painting, dark, smeared, alive. But then through the streaks on the glass, headlights emerged. Not white, but warm, golden steady. And behind those headlights a silhouette. A tall, dark, unmistakably familiar shape. A black truck. My breath caught in my throat. It couldn't be him. Not the one who left. But it was someone else I recognized. Someone who had always been in the background of my life, quietly present, never intrusive, always respectful. My protector. My bodyguard. The one person who had always watched over me, without asking for anything in return. The truck rolled to a slow stop in front of the house, the engine's deep rumble cutting through the storm like a heartbeat. For a moment, neither of us moved. I stood inside, just inches from the window, and whoever sat in that truck remained still as if giving me time, space, permission to breathe. Then the driver's door opened, and he stepped out. The rain hit him immediately, soaking his jacket, turning his dark hair slick, running down the sharp lines of his face. But he didn't flinch. He didn't raise a hand to shield himself. He just stood there, breathing in the storm like it was nothing new to him, like he had walked through much worse. The porch light illuminated him just enough for me to see the expression on his face. A mixture of concern, anger, and something else I couldn't quite name. Not romantic, not possessive, not pity, but something steady, something grounding, something like fierce loyalty. He walked toward the house with slow, purposeful steps, not rushing, not hesitating, just moving with the quiet confidence of someone who always arrives when needed, not because they're asked to, but because they care. I opened the door before he could knock. The look on his face softened instantly when he saw me. His jaw unclenched, his shoulders dropped slightly, but his eyes, they sharpened with a fury I had never seen before. "You're freezing," he said softly. His voice layered with calm and anger all at once. I didn't know what to say. Words sat in my throat, stuck behind emotion I didn't have the strength to untangle. All I managed was a quiet, broken, "He left." His eyes darkened, stormier than the sky behind him. "I know," he said. Something in his tone made my heart skip. "How?" I whispered. "I saw him on the road." A pause. He was alone. Those last two words carried weight, meaning, truth. He had known instantly. He had turned the truck around. Because while the man who left me drove away without a backward glance, the man standing in front of me came back without hesitation. He stepped closer, rain dripping from his jacket onto the floor. "You shouldn't be out here alone tonight." I swallowed hard. "I'm not." He held my gaze. And for the first time that night, I believed it. He didn't cross the doorway. He didn't assume. He didn't invade my space. He just stood there waiting, letting me decide. And that alone told me everything about him. The rain continued to fall in sheets behind him, the storm swallowing the world beyond the porch. But here, between us, a different kind of quiet existed, a warm one, a safe one. He finally spoke again, voice low and steady. "Get your coat. You shouldn't stay here tonight." There was no judgment in his tone. No pressure, just a simple truth. I didn't deserve to sit in a house filled with the echoes of someone who didn't value me. I deserved warmth. I deserved safety. I deserved someone who showed up. And he had. Without thinking, without planning, without overanalyzing, I stepped toward him. The storm behind him roared even louder, the night thick with rain and emotion and unanswered questions. But none of it scared me anymore, because the moment he arrived, everything changed. The door clicked softly behind me as I stepped out onto the porch, the storm instantly swallowing me in its cold embrace. The rain hit my skin like tiny needles, but I barely felt it. My heartbeat was too loud, my thoughts too fast, my emotions too tangled. The blanket had fallen off my shoulders inside, and now all I had was my damp clothing, clinging tightly to my body, carrying the chill of everything that had just happened. But when I looked up at him, standing there in the storm, not an inch shifted by the cold or the rain, the world suddenly didn't feel as frightening. His presence had always been like that. Steady, grounded, solid, like a wall built between me and everything that wanted to tear me apart. He opened the passenger door for me. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. It wasn't some romantic cliché. It was a quiet, respectful movement. The kind that comes from someone who thinks of your comfort before thinking of his own. I hesitated for the smallest moment. Not because I doubted him, but because stepping into that truck felt like stepping into a new chapter, one I wasn't sure I was ready for, even if I desperately needed it. He noticed the hesitation. Of course he did. He always noticed everything. "You're safe with me," he said softly. 4 simple words, but they felt like a lifeline thrown into the storm, so I climbed in. The warmth inside the truck wrapped around me instantly, biting into the cold that had dug itself into my bones. The soft hum of the engine vibrated beneath my feet. Steady, comforting, constant. Everything about this truck felt different from the car that had just driven away from me. That car had carried distance, anger, exhaustion. This truck carried something else entirely: security, stability, a presence I didn't have to earn. He closed the door gently. Another detail that struck me: no slamming, no frustration, no tension, just quiet control. He walked around to the driver's side, and for the first time that night, I took a deep breath. When he finally sat, he didn't start driving immediately. He didn't rush. He didn't bombard me with questions or demand explanations. He simply looked at me. Not at my wet hair. Not at my ruined mascara. Not at the pain I was failing to hide. He looked at me, really looked, as if searching for the version of me that had been buried under months of neglect. "You're shaking?" he said quietly. I hadn't even realized it. My hands trembled in my lap. Small involuntary movements I couldn't control. He reached forward and turned on the heat. The warm air rushed out, filling the space with a soft hum. Then he reached behind his seat and pulled out a spare jacket. Thick, warm, clearly his. He held it out. I stared at it for a moment. It felt too personal, too intimate, too real. But then he said, "Please," a single word spoken gently with concern that cracked something open inside me. I took the jacket and wrapped it around myself. It smelled like him, clean, warm, familiar. The scent settled over me like another layer of protection. He waited a moment before speaking again. "What happened?" Not a demand, not an accusation, just an invitation to breathe. I swallowed hard. My voice felt small. He left me on the road. His jaw tightened, his eyes darkening with a storm of their own. He didn't interrupt. He didn't curse. He didn't explode. He just listened, the way he always had, the way I had always wished someone would. He said I needed to learn my place. I whispered. He inhaled sharply, but still stayed silent. So he drove off. I continued. And I just stood there. Finally, he spoke, slowly, carefully, choosing every word like it mattered. "You didn't deserve that. A beat. You never deserved any of the ways he made you feel small." My throat tightened. How did he see everything I tried so hard to hide? He started driving, the truck cutting smoothly through the storm. The windshield wipers moved rhythmically, each swipe clearing the chaos outside so I could finally see the road ahead. For a long time we didn't speak, but the silence between us wasn't heavy or sharp like the silence in my house had been. It wasn't a silence filled with judgment or distance. It was warm, the kind of silence that lets you breathe without fear of saying the wrong thing. I turned my head and looked at him. The rain softened his features, smearing the world outside into a blur while sharpening the details inside the truck, the strong lines of his jaw, the focus in his eyes, the tension in the way he held the steering wheel, as if he was controlling more than just the truck, as if he was holding the situation together so I didn't have to. "Why did you come back?" I asked quietly. He didn't look away from the road. "Because I knew you needed someone." My heartbeat stumbled. "Why you?" I whispered. This time, he glanced at me, and there was a truth in his eyes that I had never seen before, a truth I had been too blind, too distracted, too broken to recognize all this time. Because his voice lowered. I've always been that someone for you. The words hit harder than the storm pounding on the roof. He wasn't claiming anything. He wasn't stepping into a role that wasn't his. He wasn't overstepping boundaries. He was stating a fact, a simple truth he had lived long before I ever understood it. The road stretched before us, wet and endless. The storm roared outside, but inside the truck, something softer began to grow. A space where I could breathe. A space where I wasn't small. A space where someone chose to show up. Without being asked, without hesitation, without conditions. With every mile we drove, something inside me shifted. I wasn't being rescued. I wasn't being saved. I was being seen. And for the first time in a very, very long time, that was enough.